The Bolshevik regime tries to convince farmers of the benefits of collectivization.
My father found a spot where he could, stood on his tractor and gave a speech. He said that our lives would change, that there would be more equipment every year, that physical labour would decrease, there would be more machines, and we'd control them, that the roads would be asphalted, there would be electricity in the village, houses would be built in bricks, there would be new schools, a hospital. People were really happy.
After labour by hand comes the time of the machines and of beautiful modern innovation. These tractors, filmed by Eisenstein, pave the way towards the socialism of the 20th century. In truth, though, chaos in the harvest caused by collectivization and forced requisition creates famine. Between 1932 and 1934, 6 to 7 million farmers die, mostly in Ukraine.
The most terrible night was when they took my father. I cried a lot, and I still cry when I think about it. Excuse me. And also, when I remember the face of my friends at school, and my family who died of starvation.
The removal of kulaks as a social class causes 300,000 people to be sent to camps in 3 years, along with the deportation of more than 2 million men, women and children in special settlement camps, where they are under house arrest. In 1930, every inmate in prison is sent to labour camps. The management of these camps is the OGPU's job. The OGPU creates a central direction of the camps, whose acronym in Russian is written Gulag. This reform and the creation of the Gulag have an economic goal. During the 1930s, while Stalin launches Russia into an industrialization frenzy, deported people become a key economic element. This is no longer about assigning a couple of thousand inmates to logging like they did in Solovetsky. This is about using cheap labor on a bigger scale for massive infrastructure work. The first major work of the communists carried out by Gulag prisoners begins in 1931. It's the construction of the canal connecting the White Sea to the Baltic Sea, the BBK. $120,000 prisoners guarded by thousands of watchmen work for 18 months to build a 227-kilometre-long canal, including 39 kilometres carved in rocks, 19 locks and 64 dams. Neftali Frenkel, the man who had implemented the food for work rationing system in Solovetsky, is leading the work. Digging the canal between the White Sea and the Baltic Sea is the first step in gigantic infrastructure projects: railways, canals, roads, airports, hydroelectric plants, projects in which hundreds of thousands of prisoners will break their backs. The word Zek, short for prisoner of the Canal, first appears on the BBK site before designating every Gulag prisoner. The use of labour that can be exploited at will overtakes the use of machines.
We were carrying metal cables with our bare hands. Most of these cables, all of them actually, were old and sharp. They were made of barbed wire. Our hands were wounded, blood was flowing, people often fell. There were many wounded. Nothing was adapted. And of course, work in prison was incredibly difficult.
Indeed, the technology is archaic. Very few machines, few trucks. Almost every tool is made on the spot. Wooden cranes, wheelbarrow wheels. The inmate's muscle strength compensates for the absence of power hammers. Such methods, dating from the Middle Ages, turned the prisoners into slaves. The workers are exhausted and sick. 12,000 of them die on the site, 10% of the total workforce. The corpses are left behind in the snow.
As spring drew closer and the snow started to melt, we could see hands, arms and heads popping up next to us. 150 meters away, we saw all of this. It stuck out from under the snow and the soil. And flocks of crows flew over the frozen corpses, still fresh, after packing them.
The regime's propaganda intends to show that the inmates are contributing to the construction of socialism as well. Their labour is a way to redemption. More than 30 authors, led by Gorky, him again, pay a visit to the BBK and celebrate the rebirth of the prisoners through labour, in a book dedicated to Stalin. Shows are organised all along the canal for propaganda, and orchestras play music to support the workers. But the weariness on every face crushes all propaganda efforts. In May 1933, Stalin, Yagoda, leader of the GPU and in charge of the project, and Kirov inaugurate the canal between the White Sea and the Baltic Sea. However, in practice, the BBK is less wide and less deep than anticipated and can only be used by ships with a shallow draft. The canal will rarely be used. A waste paid for in blood. A staging to give the illusion that the goal has been reached, that the party is always right. A bluff, also called tufta in the language of the Gulag. But it doesn't matter for Stalin. The BBK is a fantastic and huge display of Soviet willingness in terms of production. The Gulag's labor allows this country, as vast as a continent, to develop key infrastructure, to colonize giant hostile geographic expanses, and to search for resources, energy, and ore. In April 1933, the Gulag numbers almost 500,000 prisoners, and gigantic projects keep coming. At the same time as the BBK, the GPU starts a massive construction site in the far east of the country, in a region of Siberia that reaches minus 50 degrees centigrade and is home to just a few reindeer farmers. The project is to start exploiting the huge gold deposits of the Kolyma, a lost territory almost unexplored of 2 million square kilometers. The Kolyma has no road connection with the rest of the country, so the inmates must be brought to Vladivostok by train, a 2-month journey, and then embark on a boat for 2 weeks to the Nagaev Bay.
My boat was called Kulu, and it's on that boat that we were brought to the Nagaev Bay, to Magadan.
Mikhail Tamarin is a student when he is arrested in 1937 and sent to the Kolyma.
When we disembarked, we all had civilian clothes. We were freezing. It was the 25th of December. And by the time everyone had disembarked, many of us had their nose or ears frozen. Sometimes even fingers and toes. It was awful. We started walking and snow is falling. In some places it was 5 meters high. It was blizzard. I remember that terrible night.
In 1932, several thousand prisoners arrive. First, they are tasked with building the harbour and the town of Magadan. From a small village of fishermen, it becomes a true city. Then the inmates trace the 1,000-kilometre road leading to the gold deposits. Eduard Betsin, one of the leaders of the GPU, is tasked with organising the giant Kolyma complex, spreading over several thousand kilometres. This picturesque character was like the Tsar of Kolyma. He moved around with a sidecar with his wife, or in a Rolls-Royce that belonged to Lenin's wife and was given to him by Stalin. 10,000 kilometers away from Moscow, his power is unlimited. "80,000 prisoners living in dreadful conditions dig the ground looking for gold." During the winter, life is horrendous. A famous song, known all over the USSR, says, "Kolyma, Kolyma, O enchanted planet, winter has 12 months. Everything else is summer." Yuri Fidelgoldst will serve 10 years in the hellish camps of Kolyma.
One thing is sure, I was forced to dig by hand. Can you imagine what it means to dig by hand when it's minus 50? Dig the ground with a spike. The norm was to dig 10 holes a day, and each had to be 60 or 70 centimeters deep, at least. And that was in a permafrost area, frozen land. It was awful.
Это страшная вещь.
Bertsin is obsessed by rationalization and results. He designs a new wheelbarrow whose capacity is 4 times bigger than the wheelbarrow previously used by the gold diggers. In 1933, the daily rate of extraction of soil is 1 cubic meter. The following year, it becomes 2 cubic meters. In 1937, for the same quantity of bread, Bertsin wants 4 to 6 cubic meters per day, depending on the deposit.
I stayed exactly 5 years in this camp. I was working nights mostly. We were forced to work a lot, of course. The guards changed. But we had to stay until we had filled the quotas. And if we didn't, we weren't allowed to go back to the camp. When it comes to our tools, we only had spikes, shovels, pickaxes, and wheelbarrows. That was it.
Among the prisoners of the Kolyma, a Zek will become the writer of anything related to the Gulag, Varlam Chalamov. He is arrested once in 1929 due to counter-revolutionary Trotskyist activities and sentenced to 5 years in a camp. In 1937, he is arrested a second time and sent to the Kolyma. Chalamov faces the most arduous labor, with working days of 16 hours or more in the gold mines. He's starving and beaten up by common criminals and guards and wishes for death. He will narrate his ordeal in the Tales of the Kolyma, where he'll stay 17 years. Amid terrifying living conditions, the slaves extract up to 52 tons of gold per year, half of the Soviet production. Within 5 years, the Kolyma becomes the most important currency reserve in the USSR. The Gulag is the territory of all those exiled from the Soviet society. They no longer have families, belongings, rights, or dignity. They have nothing left. They are nothing. Slaves of the Gulag went from 5,000 to 500,000 within 10 years. They're nothing but labor that can be exploited until exhaustion and death. The prisoners literally work themselves to death. Such prearranged death matches the Soviet regime's goal of social, political, and ethnic purge. In order to maintain the production, hundreds of thousands of other, more healthy people are sent to the camp each year. These massive waves of people, this continuous supply of labor supervised by the GPU, keep on feeding the productive machine of the Gulag, like an endless, murderous process. The zeks work until exhaustion, but the workforce itself is never ending. The mortality rate in the Kolyma reaches 10% per year during 1937-38. Later on, the prisoners called the Kolyma the White Crematory. The road of the Kolyma, nicknamed the Road of Bones, is like a furrow of pain across the frozen expanse.